Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for that very nice introduction, Brad, and thank you for that very warm reception. I tell a lot of folks that I like to give speeches outside of Washington because I never get applause in Washington when I give a speech there. But it is nice to be among fellow travelers in the freedom movement and believers in the Constitution, because in this short period of time, in the last year and a half in the campaign, we did find out that we had a lot of friends here. There are some states, delegations and meetings and conventions that would not have me come, so I feel very honored that you have invited me, and I am very pleased. And I know we didn't win the election here, but we did well, and we know that there's a lot of support here because we are talking about the fundamental beliefs of the Republican Party, and that is limited government and balanced budget and following the Constitution. So we know that these are issues that are very important to all of us. Also, I'm very pleased to see Roger and Ann Koopman. They worked for me many years ago, back in the 70s, the first time I ever was elected in Congress. But I was also very happy to see Rick Hill. He pretended that I might not know him, and he wanted to see if I remembered him. I said, I remember you. But you know what I think is, I haven't seen him since he left Congress, and I don't know exactly how many years that's been, but it's been a couple years slipped by. But I think he really deserves a compliment that I haven't seen him since that time. That meant he didn't become a lobbyist and didn't stay in Washington. He came home. I was very pleased to see Senator Burns here tonight, and I thought I'd try to compete on his speaking skills. I speak rapidly at times, but I'm not even going to try to compete with him tonight. So, no, this is it's very nice. I also want to make sure, and I think his name was mentioned earlier, to express my deep appreciation for the organization that Dave has put forth as the campaign chairman for the Ron Paul campaign. David, thank you very much. But you know, it has been an exciting year for me and for the campaign. I was not anxious at all to become a candidate in the presidential race. I had been asked to do that many times over the several years past. The truth is, I did not believe that very many people would respond to the message of limited government and following strictly the Constitution. But to my delight, I have discovered not only were there a lot of people who cared about what I have been talking about, but the young people responded unbelievably so. And the message of freedom and individual liberty and responsibility has been welcomed by tens of thousands, if not millions, of young people. So as we try to build our party and maintain our credibility, we can't ignore the young people because they're not, I mentioned this on TV the other day, and the host was sympathetic and friendly and a conservative. He says, but he was too pessimistic. He says, no. He says, the young people, you can't reach them. They just want handouts. But let me tell you, the young people that have joined our campaign are rallying to the cry of self-reliance and getting out of the control of the government and getting their independence back. So the young people, there's hope. You know, and there's a very real reason for this, because the young people, the next generation's inheriting a mess from our government. And they have a lot of debt to deal with. I mean, we have a national debt of $9.3 trillion. We have obligations of entitlements, 50, 60, 70 trillion dollars. Nobody knows exactly. Our national debt is going up over $600 billion every year. And the younger generation knows this burden is being placed on them. So they are listening, and they will listen to a message that says that we want you to have your freedom and your ability to take care of yourselves, and we don't expect you to get something from government from cradle to grave. So for this reason, I am very encouraged. I'm much more encouraged than I was 16 months ago when I first started. This more or less tonight is probably the last speech that is given in relationship to the campaign. Of course, the campaign essentially is over. Our campaign has closed its doors, and we've opened up a new campaign. But it's the same campaign. Somebody says, is this something new for you? I said, no. We have something called campaignforliberty.com. And campaignforliberty.com is nothing more than what I have been doing since the early 70s. I got interested in politics in the 1970s because of the problems that we were facing financially as a consequence of guns and butters of the 1960s. Many of you in this audience remember the guns and butter talk about Lyndon Johnson running up the debt. It didn't matter. Spend forever on Vietnam, run up the deficits for more welfare, and we paid through the nose in the 1970s. And there was a prediction by the Austrian free market economists that the Bretton Woods gold standard would break down. I had been studying that, and when that happened on August 15th, 1971, I realized that we were in a lot of trouble, and that's what motivated me to run for Congress. And exactly that happened. The 70s were really tough. Paul Volcker saved our dollar in 1979, 1980 by bringing on a horrendous recession, which was a natural, necessary consequence of living beyond our means by inflating our currency and running up too much debt. But what did it take? A bad recession, a very weak economy, and also interest rates of 21%. And barely did the dollar recover. It did recover, and what did we do as a nation? We went back to spending, inflating, and doing exactly the same thing over, except right now we're in worse shape because now we're a debtor nation. In the 1970s, we were a creditor nation. We weren't in near the trouble that we were in back then. So we have to face up to this. We as conservatives and we as Republicans are supposed to be leading the charge on fiscal responsibility, and if we're honest with ourselves, we haven't done the job, and we ought to do a lot better in cutting spending. The question is where do we spend too much? I think the answer is easy. Everywhere. We spend money everywhere. It's overseas spending, it's foreign aid, it's the military-industrial complex, it's the welfare state. And a typical example of how it's the process that suffers. Yesterday was a perfect example of the problem. And I won't criticize anybody who cast votes yesterday if they happen to vote differently than I did, because they were impossible votes. But that's the way the system works. It was the supplemental bill. The supplemental bill, which is emergency funding for the war. Well, when the Democrats were in charge, we chewed them out for having emergency spending and not putting it under the budgetary rules. Emergency spending doesn't have to be counted. So we criticized before, and now, of course, the Democrats are in charge. They don't put it on budget. So the president said, what we need to continue the war is $107 billion for the war. Well, lo and behold, by the time it was spent, by the time we passed the bill, it was $187 billion, $20 billion for stuff here at home. But the reason why you have to be thinking about this in a political way and the pressure that's put on the congressman is that there's a lot of good stuff in there too. 80% bad, maybe 20% good, something like that. I mean, there was aid for flood victims. There was aid for veterans. And they put it in there so you can't vote against it.